Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome back to the Legal Lounge. In our episode today, I am excited to have a person that I admire. I actually ended up admiring her through Hulu, which I love Hulu because I get to stream whatever I want when I want. She comes to us with a very unique story and perspective. Her name is Samantha, and the documentary I am referencing is Stalking Samantha, 13 Years of Terror. And I really appreciate her being here today. So without further ado, Samantha, welcome to the Legal Lounge.
Thanks for having me, Theresa. I'm excited.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do today before we get into your story.
Yeah, so I live in northern Michigan. I'm going to be 34 here soon. I am a licensed master social worker. I primarily work with older adults currently. I have experience as a private practice therapist, working in the foster care system, some varied work experience. But yeah, that's kind of my professional background. I really enjoy sports and pets and outdoor things. Living in rural northern Michigan, lots of kayaking and snowboarding and things like that. But yeah, I was stalked for a long period of time by an acquaintance I met in college, and there was a long, the title is somewhat misleading. It's 13, the subtitle is 13 Years of Terror, but really it was more like 2 years of stalking when I was in college, and then unbeknownst to me, some online tracking and things, and then another year or two of it prior to I was abducted out of my home by this person. So
yeah, it's interesting because I did want to ask about that. I always wonder how much they sensationalize things for TV, and where the line between truth and reality meets production and trying to get numbers and clicks or views by the audience.
Yeah, I'd say, and they did such a great job with the documentary. It was very truthful, very accurate. Obviously, they did some of the filming with actors to kind of portray and make it more interesting during long periods of my interview, so you're not just watching me talking. But yeah, I would say they really didn't dramatize it at all. It was pretty accurate. Just the title itself, she was stalked 13 years. What? I was well, I mean, I guess technically yes, but for such a long period of that time, I wasn't aware of it, and it wasn't a day-to-day thing I experienced. He was essentially out of my life for almost 7 of those years. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think they did a really great job in terms of truthful storytelling, and that was the main reason I was willing to work with that particular production company and telling my story, so that it was something that was accurate and onto helping other people.
Sure. And I think that's actually a really important factor, that you point out that there was a period of time that you were basically kind of out of the situation. I think it's important for the community and the listener to understand that, it can come back, right? Even if you think you've gotten this person out of your life, that you've set enough boundaries, hell, that you've moved away, you think it's done, and then suddenly something happens and it comes back, and it could be with the same person, it could be with similar or different circumstances. and it can get more severe. Because I do think this is for domestic violence situations too, where, oh, you escaped, you're done with it. And actually, it's not like you're ever really done with them until they're no longer with us or until they're locked away.
Yeah, or there's a change in behavior to some degree, but certainly with stalking, I mean, stalking in itself is a series of repetitive, boundary crossing behaviors. It's just repetitive in nature, as is domestic violence. So, I mean, ever thinking it's really over is kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one thing I have to advise my clients on when it comes to the family law sphere, because we handle those cases where we're helping victims get away from stalkers or angry exes or domestic violence situations, which tend to be more severe. And it's one of those where we have to set up tools to be more vigilant just in general. And that's just unfortunately how we live our lives. So, and I know you know a little bit about my story, but for example, I'll never stay in a house or a hotel room and leave my front door unlocked. Now I think that's the norm for most people nowadays, but that wasn't like 50, 100 years ago. And so there's just things that you're more vigilant about as you live your day to day. So shifting to the crux of the story. So you met Christopher in college. Tell us a little bit more about that initial interaction.
I get asked this question a lot, and I honestly don't remember a lot about it. I was in like this Christian group on campus when I must have met him. I estimate I was maybe 19, and I was off campus at my apartment, and I was throwing a frisbee around with some friends that were also in this Christian group, and he came and joined us, and it was basic like, what's your name? What are you studying? Where are you from? Kind of thing. And that was about as far as it went. I don't know if I saw him more often after that, just because we lived at the same apartment complex and he began coming to some of the events the group had. But he ended up friending me on Facebook, which was really common, in 2011, 2012. That era of college students, you're meeting a lot of new people. It seemed like a safer way to potentially get to know people than like giving somebody your number. So he had friended me that way and connected. It wasn't unusual necessarily to message somebody in that day directly and reach out to them. I mean, maybe slightly weird depending what he's asking, but he kind of connected me with in that way as well.
Yeah. And I guess to set the scene a little bit, because we live today in an age where there's like chat bots and people impersonating other people on Facebook. Back then, it was a lot more focused on social connections, meeting people in college. So you're open to those new connections a little bit more so than maybe in other circumstances. So it's not uncommon necessarily to, say, oh, hey, how are you? I'd like to, make a new friend, and suddenly you're talking about maybe hanging out again, or maybe doing something together, maybe in a group, or maybe just the two of you. And so it's very like not threatening or deceiving, at least at that point.
Yeah, and in that era, there was a lot of like Facebook groups, especially like things that were going on campus, a lot of like events, like Facebook events you'd invite people to. So, it was really handy for that. I feel like social media has kind of evolved in a way, but that was a very normal experience that raised no red flags. It wasn't until later when he was messaging me a lot that I was kind of like, I think this person maybe has romantic intentions or something. And he was or is like 6 or 8 years older than me, which at that time is pretty significant. Into your 30s and 40s, not as big of a deal, but when you're 19 and somebody who's 25, 26, 27 is messaging you, it's a little weird.
Yeah, that's a little weird. So, I mean, so there was like, you're using these social media tools and just, living college life, making connections, expanding your network. And then there is this older gentleman. Granted, I feel like when I was in college, there were that group of just older people that were around because they lived around. But yeah, so it's one thing to be friends with them and see them out, but you were commenting about how he started messaging you more and more, and it was almost as if he was trying to pursue a romantic relationship.
Yeah, and he was a student as well, so he was kind of a non-traditional student. I went right from high school into college. He, I don't know what he had done. He had done some other stuff, before going to that university. So, the people he was living with, the people he was having classes with and stuff were generally a little bit younger than him. So it wasn't necessarily he was just an older guy hanging around campus or living in the same, like everyone who was at this apartment complex was a student. So
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. So it was like he was pursuing his studies and trying to better himself, and these behaviors just developed over time.
perhaps I found out, as you probably did as well, watching the documentary, that unbeknownst to me, until after all of this had happened, that he had another woman in a different county before I met him even had filed a PPO against him for stalking and had called the police a couple times after the PPO was even in place. So obviously I had none of that previous knowledge.
And a PPO being a personal protective order, just in case the listener hasn't
Yeah.
heard about it yet.
But yeah, I think if I had known that information off the bat for some reason, I think I would have been more leery about interacting with him at all. But it was a lot of just like really basic conversation. Hey, I'm going to study here at this time. We're going to the cafeteria, or are you going to the sporting event? Or there's a lot of him asking me, like, what am I up to? And a lot of like,
Mm-hmm.
no, or I'm busy, or, something.
And you were trying to be nice, of course, right?
No.
You didn't want to come across as rude. And I find that interesting too. I feel like many women in particular have gotten into that situation where we're trying to be nice, but also trying to get a point across. And we don't necessarily know if it's been understood by the person we're trying to convey the message to. And so I guess there was that initial point where he's reaching out to you. Did you ever feel like that you're being nice but maybe too nice, or that society was not really, I guess, putting any boundaries in place to
I definitely initially felt that pressure of like, I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to, come off as the B word, like as a woman in this Christian organization to this like new student. I had sort of a leadership role in that organization as well. So there was kind of like, I wanted to be welcoming to new people and get them connected to, potentially a Bible study or a prayer group or whatever they were interested in. So there's kind of that pressure of like, he was not a very forthright, especially at the beginning, with having any interest in me or like, can I take you out on a date? It was never like that, but it gradually became a lot more like private invites to different things. And I had to, initially it was kind of like a no, like sorry, and then it was like I'm not interested, like at all, full stop, like, and then it became like a no, please leave me alone, don't ask me this anymore. Getting other people involved, and that was kind of where my spidey senses were like, it's not just he was awkward to begin with socially, and so it made sense that maybe it took a little bit more time for him to just not absorb, like, okay, she's never accepting my invites to anything, so I'm just going to leave it alone, as most people would. Like, it took him more time. I figured if I outright deny him, this will stop.
yeah. And that setting of a boundary, and
Yes.
just, no is no, please leave me alone. And at least in the documentary series, there was this Red Wings game. I think that's
Yeah.
hockey, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't live in Michigan. I actually don't know if I've ever visited, to be honest.
That's okay.
I feel like hockey is probably a little bit more popular where you guys are, down here in Charlotte. Um, was that kind of like the kind of a memorable point where, because he had bought tickets and you later found out about a jersey that he had specially made? Was that like okay, wow, dude, this is way too much?
Definitely. I mean, it was a few days before my 20th, 21st, something like that birthday. It would be like a whole day sort of thing. Like the game was a couple hours, 2, 3 hours away, I think. I was like, why would I do that on my birthday with this person, alone with this person? It's not like a group thing. It's me and this guy that I have zero interest in. Why would I spend my birthday doing that? I already had plans for that like weekend too, because it was my birthday on like a Friday or whatever, whenever the game was. And so it was like, no, like I already have plans. And then he was like, well, maybe I could get tickets to a different game then. And I was kind of like, I actually don't even like hockey and I don't want to go there with you. Like a hockey game with friends who are really interested in going, maybe, but like this felt like a date. So that was kind of the first time I really like hard no and being like, yes, Sam, this was a date. This was very date intentions, not just, well, hey, I'm studying here, or I've got a break between classes and I'm having lunch, at the cafeteria or whatever it may be. So that there were a couple other instances featured in the documentary where he like left me flowers, and the one that really kind of gave me the ick was I asked him how he knew where my internship was, and he very casually said, "Oh, I followed you there one day." Like he took the bus from campus or rode his motorcycle or whatever, like a half hour to where I was living downtown Grand Rapids, and like followed me there one morning. And I was like, that's not normal. Like that's like if you had wanted to do that, you could have asked me where at least where that would have been more normal maybe, but that was the first time where I was like, he just feels okay just following somebody without them knowing. I wouldn't want to do that if it was like a friend, I think. So
Well, especially if they don't know that you're even around. And this is more out of my curiosity. Like, was there other or were there other guys maybe in his life? Do you know if he had any friends or a friend group?
he did go to like, I mean, most of it, he had a couple friends from maybe high school or beyond, like a couple people he lived with that he knew decently well. And then he was kind of plugged. I don't know if I'd call them friends necessarily. He was such an awkward guy, but he had made some connections with other guys in this. I think he started going to like a men's Bible study with the group I went to, which clearly I didn't go to the men's Bible study. So there are other people he was like making friends with. It wasn't just like he has zero friends and he's just met me kind of thing. Um, and I reached out to one of the other like male student leaders at some point and kind of was like, hey, this is kind of becoming an issue. And like, I'm starting to not want to go to some of the group things because, I just am feeling uncomfortable. I don't know. Like, at this point, I had like blocked his phone number. At some point, we had exchanged phone numbers in our very innocent, like, chatting way early on. And so at that point, I was like, I blocked him and I told him I was blocking him. I was like, hey, I just asked you to leave me alone. You're still texting me. Like, I told you, like, stop. So, and I don't know really what happened with his conversations with other, men in this group.
Yeah, and part of the reason I asked that is twofold. One is where is he learning some of these behaviors other than other TV shows? Because the reference to you came up. And then on the flip side, is he getting certain thoughts or actions validated? And I remember at least at one point he may have commented to you something along the lines of, "You and I are supposed to be together. That's God's plan," or referenced some religious undertones.
Yeah, and that was also very like disturbing to me. Like, I don't know why. I don't know where you're getting this info. Like, he certainly wasn't seeing that sort of behavior demonstrated in this community. That was not, there weren't a lot of people like really dating in this community. We were pretty focused on like school and maybe faith. There were some relationships here and there, but like that was not at all the characteristics of the people in this group. I don't really know where that came from for him. But it was definitely a sense of like me telling one of the other student leaders about it and he being like, okay, like I'm gonna try to like spend more time with him or like talk with him kind of casually about it and see where I get like just nobody really thought he had any capability of stalking somebody long term or going to the lengths that he did.
And there is the reality that his behavior shifted. I mean, it was almost like a different person years later. But before we get there, I remember there was a gentleman named Craig who I guess was kind of like a father figure to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so he helped gather the story and help you. I guess I don't want to give him credit for you finding your voice, but there was that point where you sat down and were like, okay, I need more help. Let's move forward with the initial personal protective order, PPO.
Yeah, I think it unfolded over such a long period of time. I mean, it was like 2 or 3 years, and it didn't like dawn on me that this is necessarily dangerous. It was more like this awkward guy just isn't getting the clue, and I'm busy, I just don't. And there's like so much when you're 19 and 20. Like, you know, I've seen other students reach out to campus police for various things, and the response had been like lackluster at times. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, what am I even going to say to them? What are they going to offer me necessarily? I wasn't really motivated until he like showed up in my hometown that one summer. And this was like the summer after I had graduated. So I assume when I graduate, I'm leaving this problem on campus back where he's still continuing school. I'm going to do other things, move on with my life. And, I'm not going to see him because it stopped being so much of a contact thing. And it started being more of a, he's following me, I think, because I see him places like I wouldn't see him the first 4 weeks of the semester between Spanish class and one of my social work classes. But then on week 5, I'd see him, and then I'd see him every week after that, like walking the same. No, like hello, no, nothing, just like things like that were odd and out of place, and like just seeing him way more often than I should for a campus the size it was. But it was really once he like drove 2 hours, found me in my hometown, and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the same internship you're doing halfway across the country. Can I get a ride?" And I was like, how do I can't get through to this guy. And it was Craig that really kind of sat me down and was like, what's the full situation with him? And the more I like talked through all the scenarios, the more I was like, oh, if somebody were telling me this, I'd be like, this person's stalking you. And he's like, yeah, like, I think it's time you need to go to the police and do something.
And I think that was, at least from one of your friends' commentaries, that was the true like WTF moment where it was like, and I think he had also been seen coming out of your apartment in the small town.
Yeah, I think he somehow found where I lived in this town, and we were like in and out a lot. I lived with 4 other people. I don't even know if there were 4 keys to that apartment. And it was like it was a place above a business right in town. And it was like a stairwell up to just our apartment. So it was relatively private. Like it was a public area though. So there were like always people walking on the street and stuff. But really small town. Like you knew everybody. You felt like you could leave your door unlocked during the day and everything would be fine. We had people moving out, and like everyone was kind of going back to school or doing other things in the fall. And Craig's son was helping move some furniture out of the apartment and said, well, I saw this guy, like somebody was looking for you. And I was like, was it this guy? And he was like, yeah. Um, and so he had like either been in our apartment or had been knocking on the door. I don't know, but likely because Craig's son was moving furniture. At that point, we just had the door unlocked so people could come and go kind of thing. Like no real personal belongings were there too much at that point.
Yeah, I mean that would scare me too. Like you've tried to tell this guy no so many times, and then suddenly your friend who's helping move stuff out of your place sees him on the stairwell. So the decision is made. Let's reach out for help. Let's try this PPO, personal protective order. I guess just for the listener, because there's a lot of people in North Carolina likely listening, the protective orders we have, the civil protective orders we have, one is the 50B, which is the domestic violence order of protection, and then the other is the what we call 50C, which is a civil protective order. I'm not going to bore you with the differences, but simply put, I did find it very interesting, the procedure. So this is the nerdy lawyer coming at me, so bear with me.
I love it. Hit me with
it. Is that it sounded like to me that you file an ex parte PPO, a petition for a PPO.
For like a non-domestic, so I would assume in North Carolina, like the civil.
If you're a victim of stalking, this is where it gets gray, is if you're a victim of stalking, you can't actually file a DVPO even if you haven't had a romantic relationship, which is a very interesting situation. But there's other requirements on whether a 50B applies. So for example, you could have been roommates before, or you could have been former household members, not just, I guess, roommates. But anyway, so as it relates to the process, there was the so for example, in North Carolina, for either, you can apply for an ex parte, but you're required to come back for a hearing because the ex parte order expires within 10 days. I feel like, okay, so it's different.
Yeah.
So for you file ex parte and it can be granted for years?
That was the judge in the county I resided, granted it for 6 years, and he's retiring, or maybe retired at this point. He had a long career, and he said, I have never granted a PPO for this long, but I think it's suitable.
Yeah. He granted it for 6 years.
I knew his son through like a small town. We went to the same school, so I kind of knew his son, but I didn't really know his dad, the judge. So it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I know this girl, I'm just gonna, pass it along. It was more like, I read everything you wrote, and this is textbook stalking, and I think this person's probably really dangerous. And so I didn't, I had no idea. I assumed 6 months, a year, something seemed normal for that. And he granted 6 years, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that takes care of that whole problem, hopefully.
Yeah, well, let's check. And that was just with the petition. So you didn't have to go back for a live hearing.
No.
That is fascinating to me. And so I presume, obviously, Christopher found out about it and was served with the documents. And then was that the point that you finally didn't receive these common or often messages or see him around as much?
Yeah, I got him kicked out of the program I had applied to halfway across the country for this like ministry internship. I had planned to take a gap year and then do grad school. And that was what I wanted to do in my gap years, this like ministry internship. And so I called them and was like, okay, I know this is like a weird first impression, but I have this situation, and I know protection orders are only like state to state. So that really only gave me protection in Michigan. So knowing I'm going to be moving to a different state, the judge had said, you can pursue this in another state as well. If if he follows you, you seem to have problems, go ahead and file in another state. And the program revoked his acceptance and told him, hey, don't come, we're not allowing you into this program. And that was kind of it. He showed up for there was this humongous conference, end of the year conference at this ministry, and he ended up coming to that, and amidst, it was like 25,000 people, like a ton of people, and he ended up finding me. And this one's like, hey, I just really want some closure. I'm like, I have a protection order against you. I was like, you know that, right? Like, I'm gonna go get security. And after that, I don't know, like, I had a guy friend or two walking with me wherever I was going, like, was using public transit a little at that point. I was like, but I was scared that he was going to show up where I was living at that point, follow me. I had no idea. I was like, I don't know what kind of closure you need. We were never in a relationship. This is just never a thing. Like, the closure is the protective order. Like, I don't.
I once actually interned at a district attorney's office, and And that's what the judge said. He said, there's nothing like a breakup, like a Chapter 50B protective order.
That's the closure you need.
Yeah, that's the very clear line in the sand. Please do not cross. Now, question, and this is, again, coming back to procedure. Could you have called the police when he found you at that conference?
I don't know that legally he probably wouldn't have been in violation of the order because it only extended to Michigan. And at that point,
so that was out of Michigan.
So I was out of state. I mean, I assume they may be, depending how busy, I don't know what it would have looked like at that point. I just got like the security folks that were there. Like he kind of went off a different direction and, they didn't have anything to do other than escort him off the premises if they found him. So that was kind of it.
And so after that interaction, and before you saw him again years later, but at least for the duration of that 6-year PPO, did you have any other serious run-ins with him?
To my knowledge, no, nothing. Like radio silent, life moves on.
And that's the creepy part, right? Because he could have done more stuff that you just don't know about.
Well, he did. And I think they talk about this in the documentary. So I had during my time at this ministry internship, I had this blog that I was like, writing. I like to write. So I was like writing, and some of my friends were like keeping up with what I was doing there for this like year. And there was this person named Sarah Mott that messaged me on this, commented on this blog, and ended up like we had this dialogue back and forth. Was like asking me a lot about what I was writing about, different things like, I don't remember what state she said she lived in, but just had some different questions, and like we talked back and forth via email a little bit. Nothing really personal, but a lot of like focused on things I was writing and questions she had. And then a while later, after I like had moved on from the internship, hadn't been writing a blog anymore, I get an Instagram follow request from someone named Sarah Mott. My profile was private, so I like only accept people I know. And I think, oh, Sarah Mott, she was that girl I was talking with who was commenting on the blog. I like opened up their profile. There were some photos of like a girl, normal looking thing. And so I'm like, I'm not sharing really intimate stuff for the most part over my, like, I know who my audience is kind of thing. So I accepted it. And turns out during the investigation, they found that Christopher was posing as Sarah Mott the whole darn time. So he got me. He got me there.
Wow.
Which is an icky feeling because I'm like, no, I prided myself in like, I don't accept requests from people I don't know in real life or like have had interactions with or things that I think are fake profiles. And it was convincing enough. I thought I knew this person.
And I presume part of that time period was when the PPO was in place.
Yes.
Okay. So he was actually violating it. You just didn't know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
And I find that interesting because okay, fast forward, he reappears in your life, and there is this almost like battle, like how much does he actually respect the law or not respect the law? And then when he reappears in your life, I believe you were playing soccer for like a league group, and you go to file PPO after concerning behavior. Then he actually inquires with the courts about whether or not there's a PPO against him.
I've never heard whether that is truth, but that is what Christopher told me. He didn't tell me anything else that didn't check out when he abducted me. And he told me I went up to the clerk's office and asked if anyone had filed an order against me. And they said yes. And I was like, so I didn't tell him this, but I was like, well, I went there and I talked to the clerk that day and I asked if he showed up here and asked if somebody had filed against him, would you be able to tell him that information? Because I was kind of hesitant, like, it wouldn't surprise me kind of thing. And I was like, I thought maybe I was in danger if he were to know that I had filed. And they're like, no, we can't give that information out. So I was like, either he's lying or the clerk didn't do their job or they didn't do what they told me the rule was. So I don't know. But regardless, he had trackers on my vehicle, which I didn't know at that point, and saw that I had been at the courthouse. So
Yeah, that's right. The trackers. I'll come back to the trackers in a minute. Building relationships is a natural part of life. But how does the law affect those relationships? Do you want to marry your significant other, but have cold feet from the many divorce horror stories out there? Are you preparing for a custody battle against your ex? That is where Modern Legal comes in. We offer education and knowledge about the law when it affects the relationships near and dear to your heart. To learn more about how family law affects your family, book a consultation with an attorney of our Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal Services at modernlegalnc.com. So in North Carolina, you're granted that ex parte if it's granted. However, you are granted a hearing within that 10-day window. And part of the reason that it isn't longer for years, months or years, is because at least in North Carolina, what they say is you have the right to confront your accuser. So a judge is prohibited from granting something beyond that 10-day mark unless the opposing party, the defendant, the alleged abuser, has the opportunity to defend themselves. And I say that because a hearing is normal, I guess, in our protective order process. And so the traditional route is you file for a 50B or 50C, you may get the temporary ex parte, you come back for a hearing. Obviously, at that point, the alleged abuser is notified. Now, they're likely notified by getting paperwork from a sheriff, and that tends to create a whole level of possible safety concerns, is what I'll say, for our clients, because as soon as they're notified that there's this document out there that has either an ex parte order or, hey, you have to show up for court. Mind you, they're not arrested on that spot, right? They're out there now knowing that this court proceeding is filed against them. And I feel like all of my clients, if they go through that process, are in fear for exactly the reasons you state, is that their levels of aggression may increase now that they know that there's this proceeding, regardless of what happened in the ex parte hearing.
And now you're in the same room together, and if it's not granted, you walk out of that room, go to the parking lot, wherever you're, that's problematic for people that...
Not to go too much into my story, but that happened because, so we got protective orders. And by the way, the limit, at least when I was a kid, was it could only be for up to a year here in North Carolina. So when you got a 6-year, I was like, whoa, that's huge. So our North Carolina court judges at that time when I was younger weren't even allowed to do that. Now the process has slightly changed. The initial protective order can be for up to a year, and then the renewals can be for up to 2 years thereafter. Again, no 6 years, but we just have to keep.
And it could add up to that.
Exactly. So I have a case right now. I think we've done like 3 or 4 renewals. So they've had protection for at least 5 years now.
The other thing I wonder too, like, especially given, I would feel totally differently about this process if this was somebody I had been like in a relationship with, or we had children together, or we lived in the same neighborhood or apartment or block or house or anything, or we work together. Like, all of this is way different when it's like someone essentially who's kind of a stranger. I think, what's the problem? Obviously that's a whole different story if you're considering like more domestic violence and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the line, right? Because it blurs. It blurs for some of my judges right now where they're like, yeah, there technically was a domestic violence circumstance, but there's no quote unquote imminent threat of harm. And that imminency, I feel like sometimes trips up the legal system, which I think was similar in your case, because I remember writing down because when because you filed for another PPO later on when he reappeared, and the judge basically stated that specific facts that you hadn't alleged sufficient specific facts that immediate and irreparable injury would occur prior to a hearing, which that imminency factor, I don't know, I feel just trips up our judicial system.
It doesn't appear that somebody is going to hurt you, but that's a pretty steep, like, if you're wrong, then the person who's accusing could be dead. Like,
Yeah.
it's problematic. Like, I would have loved even if they were like, hey, we have these kinds of questions, or let's talk to Christopher or something. Like, I was like, I don't want to end up like him knowing I filed this other protection order, and then, we're in this courthouse together, and if the judge doesn't grant it, then he
Yeah.
follows me home. He's mad. Like, is he going to be upset? Is he?
Or, I mean, I tell some of my clients, granted, some things have gone virtual, and so there is a layer of protection if it's more of a virtual hearing. But for anyone going to a live hearing, okay, great. Even if it's granted, now you have a pretty piece of paper that says he or she shall stay away, but you're walking out of the same doors from the courthouse, going to the same parking lot,
Yeah.
or possibly same parking lot. In my situation, my dad actually ended up right behind us as we were exiting the parking garage when you like pay to exit. And I was like, oh, how convenient that was. It was only in downtown Raleigh, which is not necessarily a small city. So I just get nervous with these protective orders, honestly, and the whole process of it.
It's very daunting. And I agree, like somebody has a chance to defend themselves, but to my knowledge, it's not like if somebody files a protective order against me, it's not something that like stays on my record. Obviously, I could get in trouble if I violate it, but if you're not actually stalking or harming somebody, then it should be pretty pointless. Unless you have unless you're share children or other family, or there's other mutual things that make that very sticky.
Yeah. And one of the pushbacks we get is our protective orders generally prevent someone from possessing a firearm. And so if someone has a job that requires them to have a firearm, for example, law enforcement or military, then they're much harsher. They don't like the protective order. Yeah, it's not on their record, but then they can't do their job and they can get fired because they can't possess a firearm
Yeah.
legally. So I guess I kind of jumped ahead, but what were some of the facts that you were alleging in that second PPO when he did reconnect with you years later?
So I feel like he smartened up the second time around. He wasn't, obviously, he didn't have my phone. He was blocked still all that later. He wasn't, reaching out to me on social media, even with a different account or anything. Like, no real contact. Even when I'd see him in person at this, Traverse City is a smaller city. Wouldn't be maybe unusual if he lived there that we might run into each other, but he didn't like grow up playing soccer. He grew up playing other sports. They offered other sports. He wasn't playing them. So it was kind of like, it was this mind game of like, I'd see him there. He wouldn't acknowledge me, wouldn't talk to me. I obviously didn't want to talk to him. And like, I'm just thinking, why is he here? Like, he's not like waving or saying hi, which could be good, but it could be bad. Situation, I guess it ended up bad. But I'm starting to see him over and over again, but there's no like real attempt for any contact. And so it's just peculiar. I'm thinking, is this a coincidence? Is this not? So in the second PPO, and I was seeing him multiple times per week. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm just seeing him at the soccer league. I would see him at the gym. I'd see him at the grocery store. I'd see him out at a bar. Like, there's no way you can run into somebody this many times coincidentally. And like, my friends would be like, come on, like he's got to be tracking you or something. Like there's got to be some way he's finding out this information because he'll show up wherever you are in public. That was essentially, what I brought forth was like, hey, I had this PPO in the next county over from this date. This was the information, sent all that. I wrote down all of the incidences really that I was running into him, seeing him places, my concerns about his behavior, that sort of thing, and submitted all of that along with like statements from my friend. A couple of my friends in like public places approached him because I'd be like, oh my god, we need to leave, like he's here. And a couple of my friends were like right when I had filed, around the time I had filed, but like I want to go talk to him and tell him to like stop and leave you alone. So a couple of them were like, I want to write a statement and include it because I'm fearful for your safety.
Yeah, and you had a friend who was also, I believe, an assistant prosecutor help you with
Yeah,
that
there
one?
was an assistant prosecutor on my soccer team that I played on, and she would see his appearances, and he would even he like had a team he played with, and he would often stay or ask the team that we were playing against if he could sub on the team and play with our opposing team. So he was playing against me like every week, even though he wasn't scheduled to, and he didn't know people on those other teams. He was just like, hey, can I play with you? And they'd be like, sure. So she was like seeing this, and I had told her about it, and she was like, anytime you want help, like I'm happy to connect you with a victim advocate or help you file the paperwork again. So she like looked everything over too and was like, yeah, good. She went to the clerk's office with me. And I was just shocked after my previous experience that um, the ex parte wasn't granted. And frankly, I was too scared to appear in person and try to parse out. I was like, I don't want to run the risk of this not being approved, and then him knowing that I know he's stalking me. It felt very dangerous. And my friends were all very concerned that something awful would happen. So it felt kind of safer to hang back and try to document more and reapply potentially.
Yeah, and because you were also led to believe, at least by the clerk's office, that he wouldn't find out about this filing, especially if it got
Yeah,
denied.
yeah. And at least if I could have an ex parte order, and then if there were a hearing following, then at least I would have that in place initially.
That's a good point.
So it seemed like after what I wrote that their response that the situation seemed complicated. It felt a lot more clear. It felt pretty clear based on all the evidence I provided, and especially having a previous PPO too.
Well, and also just reiterating the earlier point that, hey, I never dated this guy. I never had a romantic relationship. You obviously didn't have a serious relationship with him at all. Um, and it was still denied despite this recurrence of him following and just being there.
Yeah, and I hate that there is that kind of air of skepticism of like, oh well, had you dated, because it's kind of a different, like, do you live together? There's like different depending what state you're in. Like I remember having that conversation of like, oh, you need this non-domestic, like you don't live together or you're not in a relationship, like clarifying all of that. And I was like, I don't know why that should matter that much if I felt this way, but no, this was just like an acquaintance.
I guess I'll give one shout out to my legal system is they are trying to crack down on stalking because it is a serious issue and offense because the romantic relationship does not have to exist in some of the most serious stalking situations. On the flip side, it's also being taken seriously. I know I saw a different documentary. I forget its name at the moment, but there was a situation where an argument was before a court and the judges were kind of laughing at why would you be scared of flowers on your doorstep. And I think that's a very different response than you and I would have had we heard, the full context of a similar stalking or even domestic violence situation. And the flowers are literally the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the potential violence of what those flowers are really portraying.
Yeah, it's all about context. Like, I mean, even in my situation, it was alarming, but it can be, any sign or something could be, depending on your relationship with that person, can mean something totally different.
Yeah.
So like having to take the time for law enforcement or, you know, legal help to listen to somebody's actual story and why those things are alarming.
Yeah.
And what the person's like and all that kind of stuff is really important. I know
Yeah.
it's like people don't have that kind of time in this day and age, sadly. And I know that there are great people out there that are doing those things, but that's everyone's first like, oh well, I would love to get flowers from an unknown admirer. Like, no way.
Yeah.
I would freak out if there were just flowers on my doorstep, like with no nothing. I would not. That would not be a good day for me, even now.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Like started this whole thing for me. So
Yeah, I totally respect that, and I totally understand that. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you like the rest of the evening. I'm trying not to take up too much of your time. After the PPO is denied, you find out later that's kind of when he started his big plan to create the box in the storage unit complex. Did you happen to see any changes in his behaviors over that number of months right before the kidnapping?
I filed in July, and the ex parte order was denied, and I was kidnapped October 7th. So between July and October, my plan was, I'm seeing him multiple times a week. I'm going to start taking photos. I'm going to try to figure out what car he drives so I'm aware. I'm going to try to do more of like a stalking log and try to get more concrete evidence of all these places I'm seeing him, which also feels like I was almost stalking him, which is weird. Um, because I was like, I need to be able to prove like I'm seeing this person way more than I should. But he kind of laid off. Like I would see him at soccer every week, but I stopped seeing him other places. Like I wouldn't see him if I go meet a friend for lunch. I wouldn't see him grocery shopping. I wouldn't run into him at the post office, that kind of thing. And so I was kind of like, maybe some of this was a coincidence. I don't know, but I'm happy that I'm not seeing him all the time. Um, and in this period of time, this is also why I think he did go up to the clerk's office, is because he's thinking, oh, she's on to me. I need to lay off. And now he also has this plan of creating this soundproof box to put me in and kidnap me. And he's building this thing. Like he spends $5,000 in the construction all by himself. He fills 300 sandbags. He, takes apart these two storage units he rents. He's doing all this stuff by hand, which is taking a ton of time, all of his spare time aside from work. So no wonder I wasn't seeing him.
And do you know what he was doing for work? Like, who was he outside of this whole circumstance?
He worked a night shift at like a manufacturing company that did various things,
Okay.
medical supplies, other.
Okay. And the only reason I asked that is because he had a full job, like a real job. So this wasn't just a drifter, high on drugs or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah, he rented a room like either it must have been like above a garage from like a widow, an older lady. But yeah, he had a full-time job. He worked nights. He would play soccer. He, I don't know, would go to the gym, it sounded like. He was pretty into exercise, which, questions about if some of that was to try to impress me or to be fit enough to kidnap somebody, or, I have no idea. His own interests, perhaps, but
So then the incident happens at your house, which, I mean, you had bought and you were living alone,
I had a
right?
roommate. Um,
Oh, you did have a
I
roommate.
had a
Okay.
roommate, and she was aware of my concern about the situation. And she had just started working slightly earlier than what she had before. So she was leaving for work before I was even up in the morning. She was leaving, it was still dark out. And I had told her multiple times, please leave out the front door so that you can lock it, because our back slider door, there's no way to lock it from the outside, unlike a sliding glass door.
Sure. Yeah.
So she had and there was about 45 minutes from when she left for work when I was still asleep before I needed to wake up to start my day. And in that window of time in the early morning hours, like around 7, he had been waiting outside the home and had saw my roommate left out the door, and he came in the slider door and after she had left, and essentially I heard him outside my door, but he essentially broke into my room, and began, like, I was screaming, he began choking me, and bound me and gagged me and carried me out of the house, from my own house. So I don't blame my old roommate for that necessarily. Like, I think given his intent, he would have found a way in even if everything was locked. But I mean, she also left the door open, given I had concerns that someone was stalking me. So
Well, and it's interesting because he probably then watched and saw that you had a roommate and could tell that she left before you got up and left. So he also had some knowledge that, just someone else, a
he
stranger,
had a
would have.
tracker on her vehicle as well. He knew where she was going when she was coming and going. So without even like watching the house, he would know that. But I mean, the police, it took multiple attempts to find these trackers on the underside of our vehicles. It wasn't just like oh, here's obviously a thing that's not supposed to be here. It like looked like a part of the car. So, I mean, I had friends, we looked for some sort of tracking device because we're like, that would make sense. That would be how he'd know, show up wherever I am. Couldn't find anything. Went to the mechanic, nothing.
So he takes you from your home. You are very aware, at least, when you describe it in the documentary, you're very aware, like you are counting the turns, you're trying to understand where you're at. You are very attentive to the sounds that you're hearing. um, I can't even imagine what you were enduring at that moment while also being so smart about the whole situation.
When I saw that it was him that entered my room, I was like, of course it is. Like, it had been everything I feared and way more. Hearing after he had kidnapped me, he took me to this like soundproofed bunker he had made. Um, and he kind of like proudly told me about all the ways he was like keeping tabs on me and all this different stuff. And I was like, I wasn't crazy. I was right. Like all these things that I feared, and I couldn't, like, there was nothing I could do to get any other help before this. Obviously there's all those comments out there of like, well, this wouldn't have happened to me because I would have been sleeping with a loaded gun under my pillow if I were her. Like, okay, well, yeah, that's a choice. Like, yeah, I guess I could have done that. I was never comfortable being responsible for a weapon like that, given I was like renting a room to another person. Um, there's a responsibility for responsibly like having a firearm. And in that kind of situation, I would have had my firearm locked, maybe within accessible, space, but I would have been able to unlock the case, and then I would have been like, what would I have done? Shot him? Like, now I'm murdered somebody. Like, there's no, people say things like that, and there's like no easy solution to any of it.
Well, and didn't you have a machete?
Yeah, I was sleeping with a very sharp, like to the touch, you could draw blood with this machete, like any real pressure on your finger. And I was sleeping with it like tucked under my mattress with the end of it kind of like almost hanging out that I could grab it
Yeah.
easily. Or
So I mean, you
if somebody broke
Like you had something, but still, even in the moment where everything's happening, it's not always feasible.
Yeah, or safe. At that point, honestly, I was like, I think there's somebody on the other side of this door. I'm still laying in bed. I'm thinking, I don't know if they have weapons. If they don't, now I've introduced one to this person who's likely more awake, stronger, and faster than me. This may be worse than dealing with whatever's on the other side of the door. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't regret anything I did really, but there was a lot of like, well, how am I going to get out of this? And knowing like people that get kidnapped the second they're moved to another location, their chances of survival go way down. Like I had watched enough shows to understand that this wasn't looking good. Um, and I was like, well, I at least know this person a little bit from college. Like, what are they after? What can I do? Like, it was clear that I needed to use my mind to kind of understand this person and convince him to let me go. I wasn't going to be able to fight my way out of it. I couldn't run. I was chained up. There was nothing to really do besides convince him to let me go before things got a lot more tense. If people started looking for me, if I'd been missing a long period of time, he gets more agitated, as people might when the police are hunting for them.
He had the whole plan of leaving your kayak in the middle of, I think, a lake or a body of water so that it would keep law enforcement busy. Which I'm sure that was terrifying too, because you're like, no, I'm here in this box, possibly a storage unit, obviously away from people.
Quarter-mile from my house,
Yeah.
like very close to my house. Yeah.
Not in a in a lake or out
And it
there.
just, I wouldn't have called into work and gone in October and gone out paddleboarding.
Yeah.
Like it's cold.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have done any of that. But I don't know. I mean, not a bad idea, but he had no real, it didn't take me long to understand he had no real end game to any of this, which really scared me too. Like, well, we're going to spend 2 weeks. He told me, I took 2 weeks off work. We're going to spend 2 weeks together in this bunker. He had everything he needed for that and showed me everything. And I'm thinking, well, what happens after 2 weeks? Like, police are looking for both of us at this point. Like, are you just going to open the door and let me walk away? Like, how there's no good ending to it at that point. And he had no real answer for any of it. And I was like, it's not going to go well. His only way out of it is killing me, essentially, and trying to get away. So,
and I guess the mental gymnastics of that, and then the decision. Obviously, you're trapped. You're not able to get any help. No one really knows you're missing yet, and I can only imagine the inner turmoil you had in when he requested to have sex with you, and you're like, no, that can't be one of the options. But then again, it's that or imminent death, possibly. Like, I mean, I guess just take me through it, like to the extent you're comfortable. Like,
I mean, that was essentially kind of my choices where, I had been pushing him little bits of like trust all day and like, what if like I don't want to go to the police about this. He's like, I know I did something wrong. Like what I did was not cool. I had duct tape all in my hair, like my lip skin had been like pulled off partially, like my lips were like bloody. Um he was like, this is a crime. Like I did something bad. And he's afraid. I learned he's like really afraid of going to prison, and like he wants a relationship with me. And I think, well, like, how can I use this to my advantage? Like, what if I can convince him that I won't go to the police? I never have that. I am always going to the police. If I get out of this, I'm going to the police. um, but what if I can convince him that he can trust me and that I won't go to the police, and we can both get what we want? We can get out of here, out of this situation. Maybe there's a future for some sort of friendship. And like, I convince him of this through this whole day. And I know that things are going to get more difficult once people know I'm missing. Like, I worked from home, so essentially he took my work phone, made me text my boss, and normally I would have called her. I was like, and he was like, I'm too sick to talk on the phone or something. And so nobody knew I was gone. So I was like, well, my roommate's gonna know when she gets home and I don't come home and I've not talked to her or anything. Like, people are gonna start, like, I have commitments that weekend. This was a Friday. I was like, I'm not just gonna not show up to any of these. Like, something's gonna be very off come, like, I have less than 24 hours to try to make this not a problem in terms of police looking for me or that kind of thing. And just like my own sanity. I'm like, I can only calmly talk with this guy for so long before I'm going to start to lose it. Like, um, and so he was like, well, the only way I feel like I could trust you is if I sleep with you. I'm like, I'm dating somebody and you know this. And I would never like sleep with somebody who's my friend. And I've already told you I'm not romantically interested in you. Various ways, even that day. Like, no, not going to happen. And so it's this like tough, like weighing, like, is it more important for me to get out of this quickly and alive? Or, like, if he wanted, he could easily tie me up to the wall and rape me. And I would have way less control over that situation than to willingly I can't give consent in that situation. Part of consent is like a willingness, and you can't be like persuaded or coerced, and that's exactly what that is. It has to be freely given, and that is not freely given in that situation. And so I made the choice that it was more important for me, and I was pretty certain he would follow through on his end of the bargain to let me go if we had sex. And I made him like shake my hand on it because I was like, integrity is important to him. I know that much about him. And I'm like, I've done nothing but been trustworthy this whole time. If that's what it's going to take, I'm going to have a hard time continuing friendship with you after this. But if that's what you need, it came this pushing point where I was like, no, 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 no. And then he like would leave, and then he came back, and I finally was like, if that's what it's going to take, then okay, but you have to promise to let me go tonight.
The urgency, the time factor, that deadline.
Yeah. And he agreed to that. And so he let me go, and he was tracking my car. So I called one of my coworkers who lived just down the street, who's also a nurse. And I had her pick me up and take me to the hospital for the sexual assault exam and contact the police. I was like, oh yeah, like calling the police with this story over the phone is going to be a real good time. Like, that's, and the police come to my house. If he's still watching my house, I'm terrified. So that was essentially the event. And then there's the whole actual court case of all of this. Like, he gets 6 significant charges that carry hefty sentences if convicted. So in a way, I was thankful for that because so many people that are stalked don't, if they're able to get a conviction, it's for stalking, it's for some other lesser sentence, and it gives some reprieve for a short period of time, but you know the person comes back or goes after someone else. Or
And I thought it was, I know, a very hard conundrum to be in where, yeah, he's charged with very serious offenses, but then there was the plea deal, which dropped the sexual related offenses because he was just hung up on the fact that, no, I didn't rape her, not really grasping that there was no way you could consent in a locked box in the middle of a storage unit, middle of nowhere, at least for you. And he still then got beyond, above the, I guess, recommended guidelines for sentencing on the stalking and kidnapping charges with the court.
yeah, it was torture, aggravated stalking. They might have dropped home invasion, I don't recall, but that
Mm-hmm.
kidnapping. some significant things. And yeah, it was tough. To me, it was important that all of the charges were included. I was like, get him on every single thing. Like, I will happily take the stand. I don't care. Like, if that's going to put him away for longer, which I assumed more charges would equal more sentence.
But then, but then the lawyers, with obviously your input, were like, let's see what we can get, even with lesser charges. Let's get as many years as possible. And I think it was 40 to 60 years. And then even if he got out, he is on a ankle bracelet or monitor for the rest of his life.
Yes, and um, they have this part of the sentencing in the documentary, but the judge was actually the same judge that had denied my PPO. So it was interesting watching through my court process that dawn on him. There was a point where I could see it clicked with him earlier on before sentencing and stuff, obviously, that this had come across his desk before. And he, I think he was very empathetic toward me. I mean, before I read my statement, he had some words for me personally. And then as he was issuing the sentence, like, given a white male's life expectancy in Michigan is whatever it is, 80 years or something, and you're 40 or whatever, like, I want to make sure that you're likely going to be away for life because I don't believe that there's a chance for rehabilitation. You had chances, all of these different parts, and nothing has deterred you. So at this point, nothing's going to change. And he had made some statements even while in jail that were pretty convincing that he was hell bent on what he was going to do to me. So yeah, I was thankful for that sentence, and I feel bad for the people that don't get that kind of reprieve, or people that are stalked or go through something like that and don't survive, because there's a lot of them. And that weighs heavy on me, that they never had the opportunity to tell their stories or get justice or protection. And I mean, I'm sure you've worked with families like that as well. Like, it weighs a lot on me, and I feel like I have this sense of like gratitude that I have each and every day, and the peace that I have knowing I can open up my phone and see where he's located in terms of the prison system, and that sort of thing, and that he's away for that period of time, that even if he does get released, I mean, I'm not going to have to worry about that until I'm, I don't know, 80 or something. Like,
That level of, and I don't even want to call it comfort, but at least it's a reassurance. You know where he's at, isn't had by a lot of individuals. I know, like my father, and it's kind of crazy, but he's not only abused multiple women, but he is actually convicted of manslaughter, and he's not behind bars. And I just find that crazy, like honest to God, crazy. Now, granted, he also traveled to a number of different states, and the states don't necessarily talk. And here in North Carolina, I still personally have at least one warrant for his arrest, but I do know that there's at least two other warrants for his arrest in North Carolina. So should he step in this state, I can get him arrested immediately. But that lack of closure in a way for a lot of victims out there, or safety, is, I mean, I actually don't know if because on the last season I interviewed my mom, and I don't know if we mentioned this, and maybe we did, but it's the reality that we won't know for sure what's happening to him until he's dead, because we don't have any knowledge of him being in a jail, or a tracker or GPS on him, and I know that's a reality for a lot of people out there, a lot of survivors.
No wonder people don't want to speak up about it. Like, if he hadn't had the sentence he did, I don't know, I would have been a lot more hesitant to share my story. Like, I get, like, well, what's the retaliation if I start speaking out about stalking and talking about what's happened to me, and then this person, gets out of prison or never goes in the first place and gets mad at me and,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
will
real thing. And that's I actually have an interview on our first season with a domestic violence survivor. She actually wanted me to put her name and face on everything, and I said no, because not only are you a domestic violence survivor and he can retaliate because he hasn't been arrested for really anything serious, but you have kids, and we wouldn't that want that retaliation to then trickle to them possibly. So switching gears completely, because I admire you so much for now turning this into an opportunity to share your story and spread awareness. But you also have founded an organization.
Yeah, my friend Robin and she's kind of been through with me through all of this, as a really great friend. We both have like full-time jobs, but we're like, there's got to be something we can do in terms of getting awareness out there, helping survivors, provide resources. I'm a social worker, like, this is in my wheelhouse to advocate for people that have had power taken from them, to advance social justice, all of those, types of things. I'm sure you work with plenty of social workers as well. Um, and so we started this organization called Beekeepers Advocacy. You can find us at beekeepersadvocacy.org. Um, and it's pretty much the two of us right now. And ultimately, currently a lot of it is like different speaking engagements, either to the public, to training for law enforcement, social workers, other people that support victims, both from a victim's, like, or survivor's perspective, as well as like a social work perspective, having that knowledge and experience I have as well, seeing this through that lens. I'm not doing so much like work directly with survivors. Obviously, there are people that reach out looking for resources or support, and I connect them to, what they're looking for. I'm not doing like one-on-one therapy with like survivors or anything at this point. But just the number of people that have privately like shared their stories with me and like have been encouraged by my sharing, like, for change, or just feeling safe to come out there with their story, or move them to look at pressing charges or any variety of things. A lot of it too is just like small things. Like, I hear from a lot of women, like, I mean, stalking can be men against women, can be women against women, men against men, like gender, it can go any direction, but in terms of stalking. But I've had a lot of women approach me and say, um, you've given me a different perspective about how I approach that person who's asking me on a date, or, whatever, in terms of setting boundaries in a strong way, instead of just kind of shrugging it off, being more direct from the get go, which I think is something most people can identify with. And also the fact of like, this isn't just a protecting women or victims, it's how do we prevent this from happening in the first place? Because if it's not you or me, it's going to be somebody else. How do we prevent this from happening? How do we get people the support they need to, had he had intervention earlier on in college, maybe this would have been a totally different story for both of us.
Yeah. Or when he was, sentenced that first time, what other programs or initiatives could the court have ordered versus just, a short sentence or probation? And
Yeah.
what tools are available? I mean, I'll be honest, I think it starts when they're really young. So we actually pass out coloring books to kids of how to deal with stress and conflict in healthy manners.
Oh, I
And
love
so
that.
my husband just makes fun of me, but I'm like, you got to start them early. You really
It's
got to start
true.
them
And even
early.
I did a talk recently, like in my local area, and I was saying like, okay, maybe this doesn't apply to you, but there was quite a few like older folks in the crowd. I was like, how many of you are parents or grandparents? Like, how many of you are talking about boundaries and consent from kids, like two kids of both genders from a young age? Like, giving kids the option of, if you don't want to hug this person, I'm not going to make you. Like, a no is a no, and our private parts are our private parts. And, most people were like taught about that in some way as sorry, a kid, but like teaching that concept of consent and no at a young age, and helping people realize what those red flags are earlier on before you get down a road and potentially in a relationship with someone even that potentially has violent tendencies or may start stalking you if you break up, or whatever the situation may be, is really important. And
Yeah.
we're all,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh, that connects some dots that didn't realize were there. I mean, what you said couldn't resonate with me more, because people ask me a lot. They're like, well, what leads to divorce? And my number one response is inability to communicate effectively. And that could be not communicating at all. That could be someone not having boundaries or not have communicated their boundaries. Or it could be poor forms of communication, such as trying to assert power and control, and it turning into a possibly violent situation, whether that's mental and emotional abuse or it turns into physical abuse. And so if we can, as a society, really work on consent, boundaries, and communication, I mean, that will have ripple effects. I also joke, I wish I could work myself out of a job, because I hope one day that divorce rates will actually go down, and that, there won't be such a high prevalence of victims of abuse. But until then, going to continue to speak out and advocate.
Unfortunately, I think both attorneys and social workers have good job security.
Yeah.
Although we would like for that to, we'd like jobs, but
yeah.
maybe not such dark topics potentially.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Samantha, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. And obviously, feel free to reach out if you're in Charlotte. Happy to give you a tour around town.
Yeah, I would love that. I know I've never been to Charlotte. I don't think I've been to North Carolina, but.
Hey, we have a great state. You should come visit. Especially the beaches and the mountains.
Yes, I would love that. I think especially like November and April are like the worst months, because it's like cold and melty or yucky. And
well, you're welcome anytime.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
And I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited to check out this episode and probably some of your others as well. So
I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.